Chosen one, a great restoration is beginning in your life. Chosen one, there are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart at the same time. Dreams are delayed, relationships break, opportunities disappear, and prayers appear to echo into silence. During those seasons, it is easy to believe that God has forgotten you. It is easy to look at your circumstances and conclude that your best days are behind you. But what if the very season you called loss was actually preparation? What if the wilderness was not punishment, but training? What if the doors that closed were not signs of rejection, but signs of divine protection? Many chosen people misunderstand the process of restoration because they expect God to restore things immediately. They imagine that restoration begins when blessings arrive, when doors open, or when miracles become visible. Yet heaven often starts restoring a person long before any outward evidence appears. The restoration begins in the heart before it reaches the hands. It begins in the spirit before it transforms the circumstances. It begins in the unseen before it manifests in the visible world. You may have spent years carrying burdens nobody understood. You may have cried tears that nobody saw. You may have fought battles that nobody knew existed. There were nights when you questioned your purpose. There were mornings when you struggled to find strength. There were moments when you wondered why your path seemed harder than everyone else's. But what if those struggles were not signs that you were abandoned? What if they were signs that you were being prepared for something extraordinary? The truth is that God often restores people differently than they expect. Restoration is not merely getting back what was lost. Restoration is receiving something greater because of what was lost. When God restores, He does not simply rewind the clock. He redeems the pain. He transforms the lessons. He uses every disappointment, every betrayal, every delay, and every challenge to build a future that could not have existed without the process. The chosen are frequently led through seasons of breaking before seasons of rebuilding. The old identity must die before the new identity emerges. The old mindset must be removed before divine wisdom can take root. The old attachments must be released before greater connections can enter. What feels like destruction is often construction hidden behind temporary discomfort. Perhaps you have noticed subtle changes recently. Maybe your perspective is shifting. Maybe certain relationships are fading away. Maybe your desires are changing. Maybe you no longer fit into environments that once felt comfortable. Maybe there is a growing sense that something significant is about to happen. These are not coincidences. Restoration often begins with internal transformation before external transformation follows. God knows exactly where you are. He knows every sacrifice you made. He knows every prayer you whispered. He knows every act of faith you demonstrated when nobody was watching. Heaven keeps record of what the world overlooks. The seeds you planted in faith are not forgotten. The tears you shed in secret are not wasted. The battles you fought in silence are not ignored. Chosen one, this message is not about empty motivation. It is about recognizing a spiritual reality that may already be unfolding in your life. Restoration is beginning, not because circumstances suddenly changed overnight, not because everything became easy, but because the season itself is changing. The chapter of preparation is giving way to the chapter of manifestation. The same God who sustained you through the valley will lead you to the mountain. The same God who strengthened you during the storm will reveal why the storm was necessary. The same God who allowed the testing will also bring the testimony. What you survived was not meaningless. What you endured was not wasted. What you learned was not accidental. As you continue listening, prepare your heart to see your story differently. Prepare yourself to recognize the hidden signs of restoration. Prepare yourself to understand why your greatest setbacks may become the foundation of your greatest victories. Because, chosen one, a great restoration is beginning in your life, and the evidence may already be appearing in ways you have not yet recognized. God is restoring what the battle tried to destroy, chosen one. One of the greatest misconceptions about restoration is believing that God only restores material things. While he can certainly restore opportunities, finances, relationships, and health, his deepest work often focuses on restoring what battles attempted to destroy inside you. The enemy understands something many people overlook. Before a person's destiny can be delayed, their confidence must be attacked. Before their calling can be abandoned, their faith must be weakened. Before their purpose can be forgotten, their identity must become confused. That is why many of the greatest battles of your life were not actually about the situations themselves. The betrayal was not only about the betrayal. The rejection was not only about the rejection. The delay was not only about the delay. Beneath every challenge was a deeper attack aimed at your spirit. The goal was to convince you that you were not worthy. The goal was to make you question whether God truly had a plan for your life. The goal was to persuade you that your dreams were impossible. The goal was to make you abandon the very destiny heaven had prepared for you. But despite every attack, you are still here. Think about that for a moment. You survived what should have broken you. You endured what should have defeated you. You kept moving forward when many people would have surrendered. That alone is evidence that God has been sustaining you. Many chosen people underestimate the miracle of survival. They focus so much on what they have not yet received that they fail to appreciate what they have already overcome. Yet survival itself is often the first stage of restoration. Every day you continued believing was a victory. Every prayer you spoke through tears was a victory. Every act of faith during uncertainty was a victory. Every decision not to quit was a victory. The battle may have wounded you, but it did not destroy you. And now God is beginning a new work. He is restoring confidence where fear once lived. He is restoring hope where disappointment settled. He is restoring strength where exhaustion accumulated. He is restoring vision where confusion tried to take control. Perhaps you have noticed yourself thinking differently lately. Problems that once overwhelmed you no longer have the same power. Situations that once caused panic now produce patience. Challenges that once felt impossible now seem manageable. This is not accidental. Restoration is already happening. The transformation is beginning from the inside out. God understands that if He only changed your circumstances without healing your spirit, the blessing would not last. Therefore, He first rebuilds the foundation. He restores your relationship with yourself. He restores your understanding of who you are. He restores your awareness of His presence. He restores your ability to trust again. He restores your courage to dream again. He restores your willingness to believe again. Many people want restored opportunities. God wants to restore the person who will steward those opportunities wisely. Many people want restored success. God wants to restore the character necessary to sustain success. Many people want restored influence. God wants to restore the wisdom required to use influence correctly. The process may feel slow because God is working at a deeper level than you can immediately see. Imagine a master builder repairing a damaged structure. If the foundation is compromised, the visible parts cannot simply be repainted. The foundation must be strengthened first. The support system must be repaired. The hidden weaknesses must be addressed. Only then can the visible restoration begin. Your life is no different. God has been strengthening areas nobody else can see. He has been developing spiritual muscles. He has been building endurance. He has been increasing wisdom. He has been cultivating discernment. He has been teaching patience. He has been creating resilience. One day you will look back and realize that the restoration began long before the breakthrough arrived. You will realize that while you were waiting for circumstances to change, God was changing you. You will realize that while you were asking for immediate answers, God was preparing lasting solutions. You will realize that while you were praying for escape, God was building strength. The battle tried to destroy your confidence, but God is restoring it. The battle tried to destroy your hope, but God is restoring it. The battle tried to destroy your joy, but God is restoring it. The battle tried to destroy your faith, but God is restoring it. The battle tried to destroy your identity, but God is restoring it. And this restoration is not temporary. It is not fragile. It is not dependent upon perfect circumstances. It is rooted in something far stronger. It is rooted in the understanding that God never left you. Even during your darkest nights, even during your greatest confusion, even during your deepest pain, He was there, working behind the scenes, protecting what you could not see, preparing what you could not understand, building what you could not yet imagine. Chosen one, the restoration has already begun, not because every problem is gone, not because every prayer has been answered, not because every door has opened, but because God is restoring the very parts of you that the battle tried to destroy. And when that restoration is complete, you will become stronger than you were before the storm ever arrived. The doors that closed were preparing you for greater ones. Chosen one of the hardest truths to accept during a season of waiting is that not every closed door is a loss. When opportunities disappear, relationships end, plans collapse, and expectations fail, it is natural to assume that something valuable has been taken away from you. The human mind often interprets closed doors as rejection. We see them as evidence that we have been denied what we wanted, what we deserved, or what we believed was meant for us. But God sees closed doors differently. Many times, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. What feels like loss is actually protection. What feels like an ending is actually preparation. The challenge is that we usually do not understand this while we are living through it. We only recognize it later. We look back months or years afterward and suddenly realize that the opportunity we cried over would have led us into unnecessary pain. The relationship we desperately wanted would have distracted us from our purpose. The plan we fought so hard to preserve would have prevented us from reaching something far greater. God often protects His chosen ones through closed doors. The problem is that protection rarely feels like protection in the moment. Imagine standing before a door that you have prayed for, worked for, and sacrificed for. You are convinced it is the answer. You are convinced it will change your life. Yet despite your efforts, the door refuses to open. At first you feel disappointed, then frustrated, then confused. You begin asking questions. Why didn't it work? Why did God allow this? Why was I led this far only to be stopped? Why did I invest so much if it wasn't meant to happen? These questions are understandable. Every chosen person has asked them at some point. Even some of the greatest servants of God experienced seasons where the path they expected suddenly disappeared. What they eventually discovered was that God's vision extended beyond their own understanding. You see only the present moment. God sees the entire journey. You see today's disappointment. God sees tomorrow's blessing. You see the door that closed. God sees the one that is being prepared. This is why restoration often begins with surrender. Before God can guide you into something new, you must release your attachment to what was. Many chosen people remain trapped in old seasons because they continue trying to force doors that heaven has already closed. They spend years attempting to resurrect opportunities that God intentionally removed. They remain emotionally connected to relationships that no longer align with their purpose. They keep revisiting chapters that were meant to end. Meanwhile, new opportunities wait just beyond their vision. Restoration requires movement. It requires trust. It requires the courage to believe that God's plan remains active even when your own plans collapse. Think about how many times in your life something seemed devastating at first, but later proved necessary. Perhaps there was a job you desperately wanted, but never received. At the time, it felt unfair. Yet later, you discovered that accepting it would have prevented another opportunity that became far more significant. Perhaps there was a relationship that ended and left you heartbroken. At the time, it felt unbearable. Yet later, you realized that the relationship was limiting your growth. Perhaps there was a dream that failed despite your best efforts. At the time, you questioned everything. Yet later you discovered that the failure redirected you toward a path you never would have considered otherwise. This pattern appears repeatedly in the lives of chosen people. The reason is simple. God is more committed to your destiny than your comfort. Sometimes comfort would keep you in places where you no longer belong. Sometimes familiarity would prevent necessary growth. Sometimes success in the wrong area would distract you from success in the right area. Therefore, God closes certain doors. Not because He wants to punish you, not because He enjoys your disappointment, but because He understands where each path ultimately leads. Many of the closed doors in your life were actually acts of divine mercy. You simply could not recognize them at the time. The restoration now beginning in your life involves a new perspective. God is helping you see your past differently. Instead of viewing every closed door as a defeat, you are beginning to recognize the wisdom behind certain endings. You are starting to understand that some things had to leave, some opportunities had to disappear, some relationships had to end, some plans had to fail, because they were connected to a version of your life that could not support your future calling. Chosen one, there is something powerful that happens when you stop mourning what God removed and start preparing for what God is bringing. Your energy changes. Your focus changes. Your expectations change. You stop living in the past. You stop replaying old disappointments. You stop asking why certain things didn't happen. Instead, you begin asking a different question. What is God preparing now? That question opens the door to restoration, because restoration is not merely recovering yesterday. Restoration is embracing tomorrow. The enemy wants you trapped in memories. God wants you moving toward purpose. The enemy wants you staring at closed doors. God wants you looking toward open ones. The enemy wants you focused on what was lost. God wants you focused on what is coming. This shift is happening within you right now. Perhaps you have noticed that certain things no longer affect you the way they once did. People who left no longer occupy your thoughts constantly. Old disappointments no longer dominate your emotions. Past failures no longer define your identity. This is evidence that healing is taking place. This is evidence that restoration is advancing. You are becoming free from chapters that have already ended. And freedom is essential for receiving new blessings. Imagine trying to carry 10 heavy bags while someone offers you a valuable gift. Your hands are already full. You cannot receive the gift until you release what you are carrying. Spiritually, many people face the same problem. They want God to bring new blessings while they continue holding old pain. They want new opportunities while remaining attached to past disappointments. They want restoration while refusing to release resentment. God understands that true restoration requires space. Space in your mind, space in your heart, space in your spirit. That is why He sometimes removes things before He adds new things. He clears the ground before building. He prunes before producing fruit. He prepares before revealing. Chosen one, some of the greatest blessings of your life are connected to doors that have not yet opened. That is why your current season may feel unusual. You can sense change approaching. You can feel something shifting. You may not know exactly what is coming, but deep inside, you know the old chapter is ending. This awareness is not imagination. It is part of the restoration process. God often creates anticipation before manifestation. He begins stirring your spirit before He changes your circumstances. He begins increasing your expectation before He reveals the blessing. The reason is simple. He wants you prepared. Because when the new doors begin opening, they may arrive faster than you expect. The opportunities may appear suddenly. The connections may form unexpectedly. The answers may come from directions you never anticipated. What seemed delayed for years can change in a single season. What seemed impossible can become reality through one divine moment. What seemed permanently closed can be replaced by something infinitely better. Never underestimate what God can accomplish when the appointed time arrives. One conversation can change your future. One opportunity can alter your direction. One connection can unlock years of waiting. One breakthrough can transform an entire season. The restoration beginning in your life is connected to doors you cannot yet see. Doors that align with your purpose, doors that match your growth, doors that support your calling, doors that reflect the person you have become through every battle you survived. The old doors belong to the old season. The new doors belong to the new season. And chosen one, that new season is closer than you think. Every closed door that God allowed had a purpose. Every ending carried a lesson. Every disappointment contained hidden preparation. Every delay produced hidden strength. Now the preparation is giving way to manifestation. The chapter of loss is giving way to the chapter of restoration. The season of waiting is giving way to the season of movement. The doors that closed were never the end of your story. They were simply making room for the doors that God Himself is about to open. God is restoring the years you thought were wasted. Chosen one of the deepest wounds a person can carry is the feeling that they have lost time. There is a unique kind of pain that comes from looking back over the years and wondering where they went. You see opportunities that slipped away. You remember dreams that never materialized. You think about seasons of waiting, seasons of struggle, seasons when it seemed like nothing was moving forward. You look at other people who appear to be ahead and begin asking questions that echo in the quiet places of your heart. What happened to my time? Why did my journey take so long? Why did others seem to advance while I remained in the same place? Why did God allow so many delays? These questions are common among chosen people because chosen people often experience long seasons of preparation. Their path rarely follows the predictable timeline of the world. While others seem to move quickly, the chosen are frequently hidden. While others receive recognition, the chosen are often being developed in secret. While others celebrate visible victories, the chosen are learning invisible lessons that will eventually sustain far greater blessings. The problem is that hidden seasons can feel like wasted seasons. When progress is not obvious, it is easy to assume that nothing is happening. When prayers are not immediately answered, it is easy to assume that God is silent. When doors remain closed, it is easy to believe that life has been placed on hold. But heaven measures progress differently. The world measures progress by visible achievements. God measures progress by transformation. The world focuses on what you have gained. God focuses on who you are becoming. The world celebrates results. God develops character. Many of the years you thought were wasted were actually years of construction. You simply could not see the building process. Imagine watching workers construct a massive structure. During the early stages, very little appears impressive. Much of the work happens underground. Foundations are poured. Support systems are installed. Measurements are checked repeatedly. To an observer, it may seem slow. It may even appear as though nothing significant is happening. Yet the foundation determines everything that follows. Without a strong foundation, the structure cannot endure. Your life follows the same principle. Before God entrusts greater responsibility, He develops greater stability. Before He releases greater influence, He develops greater wisdom. Before He grants greater blessings, He develops greater maturity. The years you considered wasted were often years spent strengthening the foundation. Think about the lessons you learned during difficult seasons. You learned patience. You learned endurance. You learned discernment. You learned humility. You learned resilience. You learned how to trust God when circumstances made no sense. These lessons cannot be purchased. They cannot be downloaded instantly. They cannot be inherited from someone else. They must be experienced. And while they are being learned, the process often feels slow. Chosen one of the enemy's greatest tricks is convincing people that their journey is behind schedule. The enemy wants you comparing your timeline to someone else's. He wants you measuring your life against people whose calling is completely different. He wants you feeling discouraged because your path does not resemble theirs. But comparison blinds people to God's unique plan. What if your preparation required more time because your assignment carries greater weight? What if your delay was actually development? What if the years you considered lost were the very years that prevented future failure? Many people achieve success before they are prepared to sustain it. They receive opportunities they are not mature enough to manage. They gain influence before developing wisdom. They rise quickly and then collapse because their foundation was weak. God loves his chosen ones too much to allow that. Sometimes he delays the blessing in order to preserve the blessing. Sometimes he slows the process in order to strengthen the person. Sometimes he keeps you hidden because exposure before preparation can be dangerous. The years you spent waiting were not empty. The years you spent struggling were not meaningless. The years you spent questioning were not wasted. Every season contributed something valuable to your development. Every challenge added strength. Every disappointment added wisdom. Every setback added perspective. Every trial added endurance. Every battle added experience. You may not have recognized it at the time, but God was building qualities that will serve you for the rest of your life. One day, you will face a situation where the wisdom gained during those difficult years becomes the key to your breakthrough. One day, you will guide someone through a struggle because you survived a similar struggle yourself. One day, you will understand that your pain prepared you to help others. One day, you will realize that the years you wanted to escape became the years that shaped your destiny. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of restoration. God does not merely restore possessions. He restores meaning. He helps you see your story through a different lens. The events that once appeared random begin forming a pattern. The experiences that once seemed disconnected begin revealing purpose. The delays that once felt frustrating begin making sense. Suddenly you recognize that God was working all along. You recognize that nothing was wasted. Even your mistakes can become part of restoration. This truth surprises many people. They assume restoration only applies to things that happen to them. But God is powerful enough to redeem even the consequences of poor decisions. That does not mean mistakes have no consequences. It means that God's grace is greater than your failures. Many chosen people spend years carrying regret. They constantly revisit old decisions. They replay missed opportunities. They focus on what they should have done differently. They imagine how life might have looked if they had chosen another path. Regret becomes a prison, but restoration breaks that prison. God does not want you trapped in yesterday. He wants you moving toward tomorrow. You cannot change the past, but God can redeem it. He can take broken pieces and create something beautiful. He can transform lessons into wisdom. He can transform pain into strength. He can transform failures into testimony. He can transform setbacks into preparation. This is why restoration often brings peace before it brings visible blessings. Before circumstances change, your perspective changes. Before opportunities arrive, understanding arrives. Before breakthrough appears, clarity appears. You begin seeing your journey differently. You stop viewing yourself as someone who lost years. You begin seeing yourself as someone who gained preparation. You stop focusing on what did not happen. You begin focusing on what God was building. You stop measuring life by comparison. You begin measuring life by purpose. Chosen one, there are people who achieved in 10 years what took you 20 years. There are people who reach certain milestones faster than you. There are people whose path appeared easier, but their journey is not your journey. Their assignment is not your assignment. Their preparation is not your preparation. God writes every story differently, and some stories require longer development because they are preparing for greater impact. Never assume that a longer journey means a lesser destiny. In fact, many of the most powerful stories in history involved long seasons of preparation, years spent in obscurity, years spent learning, years spent enduring, years spent trusting. Then suddenly everything changed. The preparation met the opportunity. The hidden season met the appointed time. The waiting season met the breakthrough season. That pattern is appearing in your life now. You may not fully see it yet. You may still have questions. You may still wonder why certain things happened. But God is restoring your understanding. He is helping you recognize that the years were not stolen. The years were invested into your character, invested into your faith, invested into your wisdom, invested into your calling, invested into your future. And just as a wise investor eventually receives a return, you are approaching a season where the lessons, sacrifices, and preparation of previous years will begin producing visible results. The seeds planted in hidden places are beginning to grow. The prayers spoken in secret are beginning to bear fruit. The endurance developed through hardship is beginning to create opportunities. The wisdom earned through experience is beginning to open doors. Nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the waiting, not the disappointments, not the struggles, not the delays, not the lessons. God saw every moment, God used every moment, God preserved every lesson. And now He is restoring what you thought was lost. The years you believed were gone forever are becoming part of the testimony that will inspire others. The pain you thought had no purpose is becoming part of the strength that will carry you forward. The waiting you thought was endless is becoming the foundation for blessings you could not have handled earlier. Chosen one, restoration is not simply about receiving something new. It is about realizing that God was working even when you thought nothing was happening. It is about understanding that your story never stopped moving forward. It is about recognizing that every season had a purpose. And it is about embracing the truth that the years you thought were wasted were actually preparing you for the chapter that is now beginning. The people God removed were part of the restoration chosen one. One of the most painful forms of restoration is the kind that begins with separation. Most people expect restoration to look like addition. They expect new blessings, new opportunities, new relationships, and new doors opening. What they do not expect is that God often starts the process by removing people, environments, and connections that no longer align with the future He is preparing. This is why many chosen people misunderstand what is happening when certain relationships begin to change. The conversations become different, the connection becomes weaker, the excitement fades, the bond that once felt natural suddenly feels forced. People who were once constantly present slowly disappear. Friends stop calling. Family members become distant. Certain relationships become uncomfortable. At first, this can feel confusing. You wonder what happened. You replay conversations. You search for explanations. You ask yourself whether you did something wrong. But often, the answer has little to do with what you did. Sometimes, God is simply changing your environment because your next season requires different influences. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone is assigned to every chapter of your life. Some people are assigned to a season. Some are assigned to a lesson. Some are assigned to a transition. And a few are assigned to the journey itself. The challenge is that we often try to keep seasonal people in permanent positions. We become attached to relationships that have already served their purpose. We continue investing energy into connections that heaven is quietly allowing to fade. We resist endings because endings are painful, yet many endings are necessary. Imagine a gardener caring for a tree. If certain branches become unhealthy, they must be pruned. The pruning appears harsh. From the outside it looks like loss, yet the purpose is growth. The gardener removes what limits future fruit. God works similarly in the lives of his chosen ones. He sees influences that you cannot see. He understands the long-term effect certain relationships will have. He recognizes attitudes, habits, and environments that could interfere with your future. Because he sees what you cannot see, he sometimes removes people before their influence becomes destructive. At first, you may grieve the loss. You may miss the companionship. You may miss the familiarity. You may miss the routines that once brought comfort. But later, clarity arrives. You begin noticing things you previously overlooked. You recognize unhealthy patterns. You see manipulation that once appeared as friendship. You notice limitations that once seemed normal. You understand why certain people could not accompany you into the next chapter. Chosen one, not every person who leaves your life is your enemy. This is important to understand. Some people leave simply because their assignment is complete. Their role in your story has ended. The relationship may not have been toxic. The connection may not have been harmful. The season simply reached its conclusion. Learning to accept this reality brings tremendous peace. Not every ending requires anger. Not every separation requires conflict. Not every departure requires blame. Sometimes people simply reach the end of their purpose in a particular chapter. God then guides both individuals towards different paths. The problem arises when we fight these transitions. We attempt to force connections that are naturally ending. We try to recreate seasons that have already passed. We hold tightly to relationships that God is gently loosening. As a result, we create unnecessary frustration. Restoration requires trust. Trust that God knows who belongs in your future. Trust that He understands which relationships support your purpose. Trust that He recognizes which influences strengthen your faith. Trust that He can bring the right people at the right time. One of the most remarkable aspects of divine restoration is that God rarely removes without replacing. The replacement may not happen immediately. There may be a season of loneliness. There may be a period of adjustment. There may be moments when the silence feels uncomfortable. But eventually, new connections begin appearing. People arrive who understand your vision. People arrive who encourage your growth. People arrive who support your purpose. People arrive who challenge you to become better. People arrive who bring peace instead of confusion. These relationships feel different. They are not built solely on convenience. They are not maintained through obligation. They are not sustained by unhealthy dependence. Instead, they are rooted in mutual growth, mutual respect, and shared purpose. The reason these relationships often arrive later is because you first needed to become the person capable of recognizing them. Growth changes your standards. Healing changes your expectations. Wisdom changes your choices. As you mature, you naturally seek different qualities in the people around you. You become less interested in drama, less interested in competition, less interested in superficial connections, less interested in relationships that drain your energy. Instead, you begin valuing authenticity. You begin valuing loyalty. You begin valuing peace. You begin valuing wisdom. You begin valuing purpose. This shift is evidence of restoration. God is not only changing your circumstances, He is changing your relationships. He is changing your environment. He is changing your support system. He is surrounding you with influences that align with where you are going rather than where you have been. Many chosen people experience intense loneliness during this process. The old relationships have ended. The new relationships have not fully arrived. They find themselves standing between seasons. This can be one of the most difficult stages of restoration, because loneliness often creates the temptation to return to familiar but unhealthy connections. The silence becomes uncomfortable. The isolation becomes frustrating. The uncertainty becomes exhausting. As a result, people sometimes return to environments they have already outgrown. They reconnect with relationships that previously hindered their growth. They revisit chapters that God already closed. But every time they do, they discover the same truth. Growth makes it impossible to feel fully comfortable in old environments. Once God expands your perspective, you cannot permanently return to smaller thinking. Once He strengthens your spirit, you cannot permanently settle for less. Once He reveals your purpose, you cannot permanently ignore it. The old environment no longer fits. The old conversations no longer satisfy. The old patterns no longer fulfill. This discomfort is not punishment. It is evidence of transformation. Chosen one, if you feel alone right now, remember this. Isolation is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes God temporarily separates you from distractions so He can speak more clearly. Sometimes He removes noise so you can hear His direction. Sometimes He creates distance so you can develop strength. Sometimes He allows loneliness so you can discover your true identity apart from the opinions of others. The hidden season often becomes the birthplace of clarity. During these quiet moments, you learn who you are. You learn what matters. You learn what you truly value. You learn what God is calling you toward. You learn how to stand firm even when external support seems limited. This strength becomes invaluable later, because future blessings require stability. Future influence requires maturity. Future opportunities require discernment. And discernment often develops in solitude. The people God removed were not necessarily signs of failure. Many of them were signs of progress. Some relationships had fulfilled their purpose. Some influences had reached their limit. Some environments could no longer support your growth. Their departure created space for restoration, space for healing, space for clarity, space for new connections, space for divine appointments, space for relationships that align with your next season. One day, you will look back and realize that some of the people you fought hardest to keep would have prevented your future growth. You will understand why certain conversations ended. You will understand why certain friendships faded. You will understand why certain relationships dissolved. What once felt painful will eventually reveal wisdom. What once felt confusing will eventually reveal purpose. What once felt like loss will eventually reveal protection. And perhaps most importantly, you will recognize that God was never trying to take something valuable from you. He was making room for something better. The restoration beginning in your life is not only about opportunities and blessings, it is also about alignment. Alignment with the right people, alignment with the right influences, alignment with the right environments, alignment with the right season. Because when the right people stand beside you, the journey becomes lighter. When the right voices speak into your life, your vision becomes clearer. When the right relationships surround you, your growth accelerates. And when God restores your environment, everything begins moving in the direction He intended from the beginning. Chosen one, some people had to leave so your restoration could begin. Some connections had to end so healthier ones could emerge. Some chapters had to close so a greater chapter could open. Trust the process, trust the pruning, trust the separation. Because the God who removed certain people from your life is the same God who is preparing the right people to walk with you into your future. The restoration you prayed for is closer than you think. Chosen one, after long seasons of waiting, one of the greatest challenges is continuing to believe that change is possible. The longer the struggle lasts, the easier it becomes to assume that nothing will ever be different. What once felt temporary begins to feel permanent. What once seemed like a season begins to feel like a lifetime. The heart becomes cautious, expectations become smaller, hope becomes guarded. This is often the final stage before restoration arrives. Not because God enjoys making people wait, not because heaven ignores sincere prayers, but because the human spirit eventually reaches a point where it can no longer depend on circumstances for confidence. It must learn to trust God's timing, even when visible evidence is limited. Many chosen people are standing closer to breakthrough than they realize. The problem is that restoration rarely announces its arrival. It often approaches quietly. The shift begins beneath the surface. Small changes appear first. A new perspective emerges, a new sense of peace develops, a new level of confidence begins growing. At first, these changes may seem insignificant, but they are often the earliest signs that a new chapter is approaching. Think about sunrise. The world does not instantly move from darkness to full daylight. The transition begins gradually. The horizon brightens, shadows become softer. Light slowly increases. Then suddenly, what was hidden becomes visible. Restoration works in a similar way. The signs appear before the manifestation. The preparation appears before the breakthrough. The internal transformation appears before the external change. Chosen one, you may already be experiencing these signs. Perhaps your fear is decreasing. Perhaps your faith is growing. Perhaps your thinking is changing. Perhaps your priorities are shifting. Perhaps you are beginning to release old disappointments. Perhaps you feel a growing expectation that something better is ahead. These are not random developments. They are indicators that restoration is moving closer. One reason people miss these signs is because they expect dramatic changes immediately. They look for sudden miracles. They look for instant answers. They look for immediate results. When those things do not appear right away, they conclude that nothing is happening. Yet God's greatest work often happens quietly. Roots grow underground before fruit appears above ground. Preparation happens behind the scenes before opportunities arrive. Character develops in private before influence becomes public. What you cannot see today may be creating the conditions for tomorrow's breakthrough. This truth becomes especially important during seasons of discouragement. There may be moments when you feel tempted to quit, moments when you question whether your prayers matter, moments when you wonder whether your efforts are producing any results. Those moments are dangerous because they often occur closest to the breakthrough. The enemy understands this. That is why discouragement frequently intensifies near the end of a difficult season. The goal is simple. If he cannot stop your destiny, he will try to convince you to abandon it. If he cannot prevent your blessing, he will try to make you stop believing in it. If he cannot destroy your future, he will attempt to weaken your expectation. But chosen one, consider how far you have already come. You survived seasons that once seemed impossible. You endured pain that once felt overwhelming. You overcame obstacles that appeared permanent. You continued moving forward even when progress seemed invisible. The same strength that carried you this far will carry you into the next chapter. In fact, many of the qualities you developed during hardship are now preparing you for restoration. You are wiser than before. You are stronger than before. You are more discerning than before. You are more patient than before. You are more resilient than before. The person standing today is not the same person who entered the storm. The storm changed you. The waiting changed you. The process changed you. And that transformation is part of the blessing. Sometimes people imagine restoration as receiving everything they lost. But God's version of restoration is often greater. He restores not only what was lost, but also what was learned. He restores not only opportunities, but also perspective. He restores not only resources, but also wisdom. He restores not only circumstances, but also identity. This is why the future can become greater than the past. Because you are no longer the same person. The lessons remain, the growth remains, the wisdom remains, the strength remains. Everything you learned becomes part of the foundation for what comes next. Chosen one, there are conversations being arranged that you know nothing about. There are opportunities developing beyond your current vision. There are answers moving toward you, even though you cannot yet see them. There are connections being prepared. There are doors being aligned. There are circumstances being positioned. God works in places you cannot observe. He operates through details you cannot control. He coordinates events that seem unrelated. He opens paths that appear impossible. What feels delayed from your perspective may actually be moving perfectly according to His plan. The challenge is remaining faithful while the unseen work continues. Faith is not believing after you see the answer. Faith is believing before the answer becomes visible. Faith is continuing to trust during uncertainty. Faith is moving forward despite incomplete information. Faith is choosing hope when discouragement seems easier. And every act of faith strengthens your ability to receive what God is preparing. One day, the pieces will connect. One day, the answers will become clear. One day, the delays will make sense. One day, the lessons will reveal their purpose. One day, the restoration will be visible. And when that day arrives, you will realize that God was never absent. He was never ignoring your prayers. He was never forgetting your sacrifices. He was never overlooking your tears. He was working patiently, faithfully, consistently, even during the moments when you doubted, even during the moments when you questioned, even during the moments when you felt alone. The truth is that restoration often feels impossible until the moment it begins. Then suddenly, what seemed unlikely becomes reality. The door opens, the answer arrives, the opportunity appears, the breakthrough happens. The season changes. What took years to prepare can manifest in a much shorter period than expected. This is why you must not judge your future by your present circumstances. Today's limitations do not define tomorrow's possibilities. Today's struggles do not determine tomorrow's victories. Today's waiting does not cancel tomorrow's blessing. The God who brought you through every previous battle remains the same. His power has not diminished. His promises have not failed. His plans have not changed. His purpose for your life remains intact. Chosen one, as you reach the end of this message, remember this. You are not reading these words by accident. You are not surviving this season by accident. You are not still standing by accident. God has preserved you for a reason. He has sustained you for a reason. He has prepared you for a reason. The restoration you have prayed for is not a distant dream. It is not an impossible hope. It is not an illusion. It is a reality that is moving closer with every lesson learned, every prayer spoken, every act of faith demonstrated, and every step taken in obedience. The waiting season is not your final chapter. The struggle is not your final chapter. The disappointment is not your final chapter. The loneliness is not your final chapter. The uncertainty is not your final chapter. Restoration is coming, healing is coming, breakthrough is coming, clarity is coming, peace is coming, purpose is coming. And when you finally look back on this season, you will understand something that is difficult to see right now. God was not merely restoring what was lost. He was preparing something greater than you ever imagined. Chosen one, a great restoration is beginning in your life. Trust the process, trust the timing, trust the journey, and above all, trust the God who has carried you this far and will faithfully lead you into everything He has prepared for your future.